Hello, test. 1, 2, hello, test. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, hello. Hello. 1, 2, 3. Anybody on Zoom? Hey, Val. Hey, Val.
Sorry about that. I was trying to get the right dials. Well, I was going to try and make it, but I didn't go to bed early enough. We got company?
Not yet.
Okay, well, I'm going to go out and bring in the newspapers and make some breakfast here. So,
Okay. All right, if you could mute your audio, and we're going to be doing a little review anyway, so take your time.
Thanks, babe. Bye.
Hello, Katie.
Oh, Hey, John, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I am all right, just getting everything situated here.
Good. Your audio, I love your whatever microphone you're using sounds great.
Really? This is just the one that's in my laptop.
Really, it sounds terrific.
Cool. Good to know.
Has a rich bass sound to it.
Oh, okay. Cool, cool. Good. I actually do stress the audio of my electronics because I'm somewhat hard of hearing and I
Uh-huh.
really need good audio, especially on my phones.
Yeah, sure. Do you have an iPhone?
No, we're not Apple people.
Uh,
Sometimes it feels like we're the only people without iPhones, but we're Android people.
I can't help. I know Apple has a lot of things to help hearing impaired people. I don't know about Android. I don't know what the eco.
Well, I'm not very hearing impaired. It's just enough that like I have to strain sometimes. I
Yeah,
can
no, I
only use
didn't.
my phone on the left side, but
Yeah,
because my right ear is the problem. But yeah, so I don't usually have to use like anything more than just like thing that's
Kind
crisp.
got it. Nobody's here yet in the synagogue, so we'll just wait a couple more minutes, and then if nobody comes, we'll get started.
Okay.
You and Val.
Hi, Val.
I think she's
Yeah, I see. She's
making her breakfast and doing various things.
Yeah, I did intend to actually be there in the building, and then this morning just kind of was sleepy.
Understand.
But
Oh
have-
dear.
I have
Shame
my
on you.
paperwork. I have my paperwork from last time sitting here. Like
Shame on you, Katie. Shame on you.
I know, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's like practically the first Sunday I haven't had to take Max there, so it's like
Sleeping
we'll
in.
sleep in a little.
Got it. Well, that's why I sent the Zoom link out to everybody in case people couldn't make it. So that's perfectly fine. We may have a small class today, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm still very interested
Good.
because I learned so much last time.
Well, I'm glad. It makes me happy.
And it's funny because I've been Reconstructionist since, gosh, hold on, 2001
Uh-huh.
was when I first started hanging out with Reconstructionists. But there was never a moment when I was like, what exactly are we doing?
Well, this is everything you always wanted to know about Reconstructionism, but we're afraid to ask, right?
Like the Woody Allen movie.
Here you go. Morning, Katie. Val Kaplan here.
Or the book, there was a book that came out in the 60s or 70s, Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex, but We're Afraid to Ask.
Right, that was the Woody Allen movie, or that was the name of the
No.
Woody Allen movie.
I think he took it from the book.
Yeah.
So what we've yet to create is Reconstructionism for dummies, because
No, I
Reconstructionists are never dummies.
didn't want to do that because I didn't want to create a possible pejorative title.
Exactly.
So
Right. Although those books can be helpful.
I know, but
But as I say,
I know, but I didn't want to be
Reconstructionists
seen as accusing my friends of being dummies.
For sure.
by definition, if you're a Reconstructionist, you're smart enough to have figured out more or
Join-
less where you're
Have joined the
at.
right movement, right?
Exactly.
So Val, are you a descendant of Mordecai's?
I'm sorry?
Are you a descendant?
No, it's a whole long funny story, but I was president of the affiliate arm for several years, and one of my predecessors was a Lillian Kaplan, who also lived here in the area, and she had actually grown up in the movement. I mean, she got way back to the original camp where Kaplan and Eisenstein and the rest of them were. And so we would do a little tap dance about how we weren't related to either each other or to the great man, but it didn't hurt to have that as a last name.
But
Chaplains are naturally drawn to Reconstruction.
at Oseh Shalom, we milked that for years in our Purim spiels.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I see Louise and Doris. Good morning, Doris. So exciting.
So it's like,
Hey, Doris.
so it's 10 yet?
Well, we're now at for
Four.
a 500,000. Does that count?
No, I didn't mean the million. I meant the time.
Oh,
it's
10. Yeah, it is 10.
yeah, right on the
Okay,
button.
okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because if people come here, I will need to break and get the TV working. But so far, I don't have the TV working. So
It's meant to be.
we'll have to take a bio break if if physical humans show up in the synagogue, in the library,
As opposed to incorporeal humans.
as opposed to virtual incorporeal spirits. Yes.
There we go.
So thank you all for coming. Again, I'm going to share my screen and pray that hell that it works, because there's nobody here that I can get to help me fix it. So
Do we pray to hell as
I was
Reconstructionists?
just going to say, John, would you care to go to parse that word prayer a little bit, to whom and what?
Oh, you started screen sharing. That's
Okay,
a good sign. There it is.
can you see the slide?
Yes.
Oh, thanks be to Yah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to do a quick review. Whoops. Wait a minute. I know.
There you go.
Yeah, you're
We're
good.
changing slides now.
Yep. The
Okay,
mantra.
if you guys learn nothing else from this class, remember, I think I just have a person showing up in the synagogue.
Yes, you
I
do.
see a human person.
Good morning.
Who's that?
Marsha.
Hey, Marcia. I'm going to need help getting the TV turned on.
Okay.
If you can help me do that. So if you need to get coffee or do a bio break or whatever, we'll take a 30-second pause for an advertising from Reconstructing Judaism and
Figure out where
Patient identification.
how do you turn on the TV.
well, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Okay, hang on. I need to. I'm now taking you behind the curtain, setting up for it. Hang on, I need to find the cable. There's a dangling cable. No, not that.
Not that one. This one. This one.
That's the one.
That's the one.
And a dangling conversation. Not that way.
There you go. That's him.
Not yet. Okay, try turning the TV on.
Sure.
There should be a power button.
Power button, I would think. Let's see where your power button would be. TV, if you have one. Let me. I gotta go around. It's not on this side. I think I see a power button.
Mhm.
Hold on. No? Okay. Power button. That's it.
Did the TV go on?
No, not yet. Let's see what all of these. First of all, let's just double check and make sure TV is plugged in. Looks like it is.
It should be.
Should be. This is the TV power switch. There's nothing on the front of the TV that says power. There is a button on the side. That is not. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. There's a volume channel, menu, input, and then power, and the power button seems to be doing absolutely nothing.
Maybe it came loose from the back.
Maybe. Let's see what happens. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a.
Try the remote.
That's what I'm doing. I just found the remote. The remote is not doing anything either. So I'm wondering whether it's plugged in.
Is the cord?
That's what I'm looking to see. What this
This is.
There's a cord. There's a cord that runs.
This is my.
Okay, that's
This is
yours.
mine.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at, there's a cord, I'm looking at the cord that's running from the. There's a cord here.
This is
This
the,
big fat, there's a big fat cord here. And I'm trying to figure out where it goes into it.
this cable here that I'm holding in my
Yeah,
hand goes to my
no.
computer.
That's not the one I'm looking
This, the cable that you're holding
This
in your
one.
hand should go into
at.
there.
This one. This is the cable I'm looking at.
Is there a,
That's what I'm trying to figure out where the end of it is and what does it do. It's a very, very long cord.
is it plugged into anything?
Well,
Hey,
let's
John.
try and
Yeah.
figure out.
Bill?
How you doing?
Okay.
Good, we're having,
This is really embarrassing, everybody. Hang in there with me.
okay, let's see.
Not embarrassing.
Okay.
Yes, it
there's-
is.
Okay, there's,
Well, it shouldn't be. I wouldn't do any better.
that cord is plugged in. The question is, what is that cord? It's directly, okay. Let me see what. Okay,
You couldn't connect on Zoom, Bill? Bill?
Oh, no, I wanted to drop by also. I'm gonna drive you home in order to get some Nexium.
Oh. Okay.
Oh,
So I have an ulterior motive.
Do you want to just go to my,
I brought, if anyone is interested, I brought copies of that, the article.
Oh,
that I did
great.
Oh,
on,
good.
do you want to go, just go to my house and get the Nexium as
Well,
opposed
I
to
can
staying?
try. Are you hanging out after? the
No,
events?
I'm,
okay,
So
wait a
I can
minute,
take you, I can take you home and then
wait a minute, I found
pick up the
something.
drugs and then.
I found a cable that is not plugged in.
let me see the,
I think that's the power cord for
the
the,
TV.
yes, it's because it's connected to the TV.
Is there
It's
a
not-
wall outlet?
There is a wall outlet. There's also a very large fat cable here that's plugged into the wall outlet. There's something else that's, what is this? This is plugged into the suitcase type thing, Oseh Shalom. I don't think we need this. Bill,
Try
come
it.
here, see if you can, see.
I'm not sure I can get around.
But no,
that.
I've got a, I'm trying to figure out what this is this cable. This cable here. This big fat, see this one?
Yeah,
Okay. I don't know what that goes to.
that connects this cart, I
Okay,
believe.
so if there's a plug on the cart,
What's the other plug?
the other plug is, okay, that's this, I'm gonna unplug this thing. And give us the plug, see if that will, remove that's there.
Can you all still hear me on Zoom?
yep.
Okay, good. Then Marcia didn't unplug
Okay,
it.
no, so now let's see if, I now plugged it in.
I think the folks in the classroom should just huddle around the computer.
Okay, if this doesn't work, we're going to try an alternative.
Yeah, because this is clearly,
Okay,
this is clearly.
okay. Can you all right,
For the,
Bill,
Mhm.
can you see my screen?
Yep, it looks
Okay.
good.
Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Marcia, let's do that.
oh, wait a minute, I just got it, it's just too dark. Hold on,
Of
hold on.
course.
It's on HD.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh my God.
Took me a moment to
What
realize.
happened to John?
I'm emailing him right now too.
I'm assuming they'll be back. They were plugging and unplugging lots of things, so. How you doing, Robert?
You're muted.
Muted. No, you are, it says.
You're still on, it says muted.
That would do it. Doing fine, Katie.
Good. Good, I'm fine. I'm excited because Hebrew school's over and I no longer have to wrestle with my 9-year-old on Sunday mornings.
So the last meeting was the same story, 10 minutes of Zoom trying to set up before we get started. So
Mhm.
this works out exactly the same way.
No rush. Well, at least for me. I don't have any other plans today.
School is only on Sunday, right? It's not weekday.
Yeah, what they do for the weekday now is they have a weekly Zoom meeting with Rabbi Ofer, is who it was this year, to do like 20 minutes of Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
So that's what they've done actually for the last 5 years or so. And it's been different teachers over time.
I was talking with the rabbi's son the other night, and he was talking, he goes to Hebrew day school, a private school.
Uh-huh.
And I said, oh, that's easy. He said, why? And I said, I had to go to public school and then go to Hebrew school 3 weekdays a week and plus Sundays, plus service. And it was all tracked by the school and my parents. And it was like, that was suffering.
That's a lot. I think at one point I was doing Hebrew school Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. There was a lot of Hebrew school.
Yeah.
Plus regular school, of course.
Whereas one of my old roommates, her parents were survivors, and Carol was a music teacher at one of the Hebrew day schools or Jewish day schools in New York City.
Mhm.
She never went to shul except for the high holidays. She taught, and then she went to Israel every summer for a month. And she said, other than that, I don't want to do any prayer.
Right. Well, that's sort of the privilege of being in day schools. You could kind
Right.
I got
Around
it.
it. Yeah, you're around it.
Not like my husband with his poor 12 years of Catholic school plus church on the weekends,
Yeah.
plus vacation Bible camp. He is
Right.
not Catholic anymore. I wonder if I have John's phone number in here, if Jessica isn't having luck with email.
Yeah, I've got his phone number. Do you want it?
Well, he seems to be missing. I didn't have his
Oh,
number.
yeah. Oh, Lord. Right. I'll try calling him now. Oh, wait a minute. No, he's not home.
Oh, I was thinking cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. My brain is dead this early.
I wonder if he's trying to come into a different.
Oh,
Somebody's there.
I think he's back.
Oh, could be.
Or the synagogue building on its own. Join the Zoom.
Yeah, that should be. I'm getting a buzz on, so he may be trying to call out on it. He's back to try. There we go.
Okay.
All right, now wherefore art thou, Romeo? Let's see, John, but. John, we've got the screen share, but not you. In case you can hear this. Okay, we've got the song. We're good. No, his cell is just buzzing.
There you go.
Yeah, it's good.
You got it.
Oh, good, you're back.
You go over.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So Judaism is the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. if you remember nothing else, remember that from this course. I'm really sorry that it took so much time to get this straightened out. We may have to abbreviate a little, or we can come back for a third part if you guys want to do it if we run out of time. So let's do a quick review. I'm going to put up the timeline of Reconstructionist Judaism briefly, just so that we get refocused on where we are. As you can see, there's Jewish prehistory, and then Reconstructionism starts with the birth of Mordecai Kaplan in 1881. And then these are the beginning of the continuation of all the stuff that has happened in the movement from Kaplan's birth in 1881 to the present, really. Is this too quick for everybody?
No?
Okay.
No, keep going.
Okay, so in slide 8, we live fully in two civilizations, right? We belong to sacred Jewish communities and are committed to their well-being and flourishing. That's sort of the essence of, more of the essence of Reconstructionism. So I thought what we do to start is do a comparison between the various movements of Judaism, the four major movements, Orthodox, well, actually 5. Yeah. Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstruction, then Renewal. And these are based on conversations that I've had with people from Reconstructionism, and people from the Renewal movement, and my own research and synthesis of what I think are the differences, but I'm happy.
Oh no. We stopped being able to hear you in the middle of that sentence. Still can't hear you. Oh, now you're back.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, it didn't say you muted.
My internet connection is unstable,
Got it.
which is how I
You're
feel.
saying your synthesis between the two.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So basically what I want to do now is talk about do a comparative discussion of the 5 movements: Orthodox Judaism, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionism, Renewal. Give you the major essences of what I think are those movements based on my research and talking to people from Reconstructionism and Renewal. And if you think of something else or you disagree, please let me know. So now, so this is Orthodox Judaism as I see it, and again, a couple other people that I spoke to basically gave me some thoughts too. As you see, halakha, Jewish law with a capital L. Only men are obliged to engage in time-dependent mitzvot, like prayer. Matrilineal descent is recognized. Women are not counted in a minyan. Orthodox Judaism tends to be warm and welcoming, but within Orthodox Judaism, it tends, and these are tendencies, not 100%. Can I ask folks to mute and then break in if you want to make a comment? Thanks. These are tendencies, and I don't want to paint 100% of all Orthodox Jews as being like this, but tendencies I see for the movement. Strict Shabbat observance. There are time limitations on limitations on participation of people with disabilities. No female rabbis, although rabbis in what we would define as a rabbi. You can't get ordained, I think, from the major yeshivot as in being an Orthodox Jew. Stresses community, the importance of community, and also the importance of community sanction. And pursuing social justice is not emphasized as a basic part of Orthodox Judaism, although it's kind of baked into the halachic part of observance. So this is Reform Judaism. I'll let you take a look at the slide. Reform Judaism grew out of as a reaction in Germany and in the U.S. to Orthodox Judaism, really. Sorry, you were?
We're rearranging positions so we can read this slide.
Oh, okay. Reform Judaism is inclusive and welcoming to everyone. And this sometimes leads to sort of the lowest common denominator of Judaism in some ways. Co-officiation of marriage, matrilineal and patrilineal descent. The CCAR, the central tenet of Judaism is God, Torah, and Israel. Those are the three basic pillars of reform. There is a belief in a supreme being or entity in some ways, and then Torah, a living God-inspired document, the primacy of Jewish ethical imperatives over the obligations of Jewish quote law, very important. Reform is politically progressive, like Reconstructionism is. The institutions of Reform Judaism tend to be kind of large and bureaucratic. Bureaucratic is my word, large. You have large reform institutions, and it tends to be more bureaucratic in terms of how you do things. And the rabbi is looked at as the top, that is the CEO of the synagogue. I'll give you a couple.
Definitely not the Reconstructionist view of the.
No,
of
no.
Yeah, that's true. Can I make a
Took me a long time to figure that out.
Go ahead, Brian.
can I make a comment about reform?
Can you all hear Brian?
Yeah, Reform Judaism, and this is because I lived in Cincinnati, where the first,
Mecca.
the Mecca of Reform Judaism, the first Reform synagogue was there. Stephen Wise synagogue. Stephen Wise is a big name in Reformism. And what I found, because I had a Reform conversion, and I didn't find them as welcoming because they didn't have the strictures that, let's say, Orthodoxy had. As if you did their way, you were obviously a Jew.
I'm not sure what you're saying, Brian. I didn't understand what you just said.
I think
You didn't find reform as welcoming. Why not?
Well, first of all, there's two things that I found off-putting about reform. The Stephen Wise temple refused to allow anybody to wear a kippah or any akjama of Judaism. No talit, no. And I did not like that. I think that, you personally, if you want to wear a kippah, do. If you want to wear, and what I love here is that women wear them also. I mean, it's the other thing is that and of course, this was in the 1960s, 70s. So I want to put myself in a context of an age. But the refusal to have anything to do with what they considered to be orthodoxy, such as wearing a kippah,
I see.
and a talit, was stringently reinforced by not allowing it.
Just a moment.
Brian, can I just interject? I was married in 1965 at the largest Reform congregation in Denver. And the first thing the rabbi asked was, Jean, would you like to wear a kippah and use a talit? So I think, and it's roughly the same period of time. So it again is a function of where you were. You were in the mother church city of the Reform movement.
One thing I want to say about Reform is that it has evolved, to use a Reconstructionist phrase, a lot since certainly Brian Brian was part of it, and has moved very close in some ways to Reconstructionism in terms of its services, in terms of its recognition of the importance of ritual, and frankly, things like wearing kippot and talitot.
Also in peoplehood. I can go.
And also peoplehood, although it is less explicit about it than Reconstructionism, but the two movements have come closer together. In fact, there was kind of underground discussions in the hot tub at conventions about maybe we should merge with Reform Judaism.
They suggested it. We didn't.
So,
Wow.
I mean, that never went there. It never went anywhere. But there are a lot of similarities now between Reform and Reconstruction. There are some differences in that the institutional nature of Reform tends to be greater than Reconstructionism. It tends to be, the synagogue tends to be more rabbi-centric in that the rabbi is the CEO, kind of the top dog of the synagogue, and the stress on God, Torah, and Israel of the three pillars aren't the same stresses that Reconstructionism puts on, on how it views Judaism. So, I mean, there are a lot of similarities now, but there are major differences too, which is why they're separate movements.
Can I add just one more thing?
Speak up a little bit, please.
Yeah. When I was in Cincinnati, I became a teacher at their Sunday school. And I taught 15-year-olds. And for some reason, on the very first class, we got on practices of Orthodoxy, and they were very interested in how Orthodox Jews practice Judaism. And so almost every class that I taught, that would come up and they would ask a question, and I tried to answer it. But I just thought that was interesting. Like, they're raised as Jews, but they really then in Cincinnati didn't know that much about it.
Yeah. So this is principles and practices of conservative Judaism. Conservative Judaism is in a lot of trouble right now. It is shrinking radically as a movement. Its institutions, some of them are in trouble. I'll give you a minute to look at the slide, and then I'll go into a little riff about why that's so. A couple of interesting points. Torah defines and gives meaning to a Jew's individual and collective relationship with God. The primacy of halakha. There's actually the Committee for Jewish Law and Standards that issues formal rulings like the Supreme Court about how conservative Jews are to conduct themselves according to halakha. So that's the Reform Judaism issues responsa, but they're not binding. Reform or conservative responsa are. The rabbi is the Mare d'Atra. He's or she is the king or queen of the synagogue, so to speak, and what the rabbi says goes in a lot of cases. Obviously, rabbis are prohibited from officiating or co-officiating at weddings. And the state of Israel and Hebrew are essential elements of Jewish peoplehood. One reason I think that conservative Judaism is in trouble is because there's a growing dichotomy between what conservative Judaism says and what conservative Jews do in practice. And that is not setting well with particularly the younger generation. So there's a lot of disaffection with the movement because it's harder and harder to reconcile. Well, you say to do this, but most conservative Jews don't. So how can you be an authentic, representation of how we should conduct ourselves as Jews?
I wonder, John, whether some of that has to do with the aging out of the population. I mean, when I was growing up, conservative, it was Reform and conservative, and in suburban Long Island, you almost didn't have Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
So you basically did, I mean, we had dueling synagogues in Elmont, across the street from one another.
Mhm.
One was the conservative synagogue and one of them was the Reform synagogue. And I always wondered why we had two synagogues,
Mhm.
because we didn't have, I
Yeah,
mean, it was
you had 3
suburban
Jews.
Ireland, we
so-
had a lot of Jews, but I wonder, you know, it was the synagogue of choice for my parents' for a lot of my parents' generation.
Mhm.
My husband's parents were big shots in the conservative synagogue in the Bronx that they were members of, and I wonder whether, you know, that generation is gone at this point.
Well, it is.
And even the next generation, you know, my generation, Norm's generation,
It is, but
transferred, you know.
yes, that's part of the problem. But the issue, I think the broader issue is conservative Judaism is having difficulty revitalizing itself through the new generation, because it is continuing to uphold values and practices that are less appealing, for one, and number two, most conservative Jews don't do what the movement says they should, which is looked at as being hypocritical by, I think, the younger generation. So, you know, there's new management, so to speak, in conservative Judaism. Hopefully it will be able to revitalize and be a vital movement, but time will tell.
John, have there been any?
If I could say something real quick.
Yeah.
I'm in a lot of groups that are, you know, for Jewish people of all stripes. And my impression, I was raised conservative. My impression is that conservative Judaism is still considered kind of the default Judaism for people who like are looking for a shul and want to raise their kids Jewish. You know, it's like there's still a lot of conservatives out there who are not the type to overthink their Judaism. They're still kind of, it seems to be a default position for folks who like don't want to be Orthodox but think Reform and Reconstructionists go a bit far. So I just think that's a
I'm sure that's true, but the numbers are undeniably shrinking. So
okay.
you know, it's Bill, go ahead.
Also, well, I think because they're probably the least like super into it, you know what I mean? Like just by nature, like the Orthodox are obviously super into it. Reconstructionists, you know, we're sort of the whole point of being Reconstructionist is to like engage with it and to really like, you know, Reform and conservative are the Jews, in my opinion, who I've met who are the least like into it, and so they're probably leaving the synagogue more.
Interesting, Katie.
I don't know.
But I think I was raised conservative as well. And I think a lot of it is historic, cultural, as well as class-based differences or transitions that happened as in the Ashkenazi communities, you were probably first or second generation, you move into, and you probably you're probably closer to Orthodox, or you don't practice, you're more secular. You move to the burbs and you want your children to be raised in a Jewish environment. And there was a lot of growing up. I mean, it was very, very inconsistent as to who was more deeply involved in a religious, you know, in their religion, as opposed to what my friends and I, when we were kids, used to define as the high holiday Jews. They would come like once a year. If somebody had a wedding, if there was a bar mitzvah, they wanted their kid to be bar mitzvah. But I think there's a lot of changes, and I don't think this is unique to Judaism. I think globally, that even in Christianity and in the Muslim world, those that are in the center are the ones that are losing population, such as the Protestant, mainstream Protestants, like Presbyterian, Lutheran, etc. And people are moving either to the left or to the right. You know, they're more Orthodox fundamentalists or more liberal. And I think that's happening across the board.
Okay. Bill, you wanted to?
Yeah, just a question really, whether there's been any studies in taking Lisa's point about the polarization, the direction in which people that were formerly conservative have gone. Do they tend to go to the left, so to speak, to the more liberal progressive forms of Judaism, or do they go Orthodox?
I don't know.
Or do they drop
I don't either.
Or drop off completely?
I think
It'd be
there's
an interesting
I think there's a lot, I think two things are happening. I think there's a lot of dropouts. I also think people just aren't joining, period. So as conservative Jews are aging off, as Marcia said, people aren't replenishing conservative ranks. So the numbers are shrinking because of dieback, so to speak, and people dropping out and either dropping out or moving to probably, well, I don't know. The answer to your question, Isabel, I don't know about a study that's been done. I'm sure it has been. I don't have the information.
I'm not sure if the National Jewish, population study does, but Louise is right. There are a lot of studies out there about what's happening across the board. So we have homework to do to Google some of the general national Jewish surveys that have taken place within the last decade. I think
Kind of a whole other class, really.
yeah, exactly.
Because I could
that would
go
be a
on and
very
on
interesting
too.
class on it.
About my generation.
Yeah.
Actually.
I also, from my family's experience, there was a lot of inconsistency. On my dad's side, his father and their siblings lived in Eastern Poland, that's now part of Russia, and they were raised here Hasidic. They
Mhm,
came to this country and became ardent socialists.
mhm.
And but my grandfather would never go to shul when I was growing up. My dad was the one that reclaimed and started practicing more consistently. But my grandfather, when I was very little, after my grandmother died, he wouldn't take me to my dad's shul. He would go to an Orthodox shul because that's how he was raised. Those were the services that he knew. So he would take his little granddaughter into the shul. The women would take my hand, I'd go upstairs and he would stay downstairs with the men. And that was the same even with his brother, my great uncle Nathan, who later on returned to joining an Orthodox shul, but was not as, I wouldn't say consistent in his religiosity as they might have wanted him to be. But I think there's a lot of inconsistency generationally, generation to generation.
Yep. Well, I think as Katie said, that or Lynn said, is probably that's probably true of a lot of the different religious movements that are, Protestant Islam.
It's also a problem in Israel. Part of the problem in Israel is that Jews who refuse to go to synagogue still consider the Orthodox movement to be the standard. In other words, I don't go to shul, but if I were going to define how Jewish is, what Jewish is, it's Orthodox.
Well, that's a different issue.
It's a different issue, but it's also part of the same thing. It's how you think of your what you are, who you are, what your identity is.
Isn't Orthodoxy still the only one recognized as Jewish in Israel?
Yes.
By the theocracy.
Yeah. So let's move on to renewal Judaism. Renewal is the newest of the movements in Judaism. There was an interesting article. In JTA from JTA recently about renewal being the most significant movement in the last 50 years, which to me isn't saying much because I don't know of any other movements in the last 50 years. But it is a really interesting and significant movement. A lot of the people, and I'll give you a second to look at the slide here. One of the interesting things is it was founded by Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, Zichrono Livracha. He died in 2014. So you basically have and this is not that this is it. They actually recognize this as an issue of it's a very guru-centric or founder-centric movement. And renewal is struggling now with how to move past the initial founder and move into the newer generation of renewal, what renewal is going to be for the later generation.
Did Reconstructionism suffer at all when Kaplan died?
No.
Oh.
I mean, it suffered from the loss of Mordechai Kaplan, but
Ira.
But it really wasn't centered
But-
on them.
Others.
but Mordecai Kaplan, that Reconstruction has been moved on in a lot of ways from the original Mordecai Kaplan, and even Ira. There were, I think I told the story last time. If I did, stop me. Ira Eisenstein, who is one of the founders of Reconstructionism, along with Mordecai, gave a lecture at Oseh Shalom years ago while he was still alive. And he literally pounded the bima and railed against angel healing services.
Angelology.
He said, how can you possibly pray to angels for renewal and healing? And this is outrageous. This is not Reconstructionism. He was of that generation in which Reconstructionism was very, quote unquote, head-centric. It reached the heart through the intellect, I guess is a good way of putting it. And Reconstructionism had already moved on from a lot from that emphasis, and some would say overemphasis on the intellect, and a not recognizing the emotional nature of religious worship and prayer. And so, yeah, I mean, it suffered obviously from the loss of Mordecai and Ira, who died in I think 1990 sometime or not. But the movement was strong enough that it was able to move on from that, and has moved on, much to the chagrin of some Reconstructionists.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Short, it's going to be short.
Sure.
This says renewal rejects chosenness and the covenant at Sinai. And I was kind of wondering if renewal was also somewhat attached to the Young Israel movement, but that statement tells me no.
I don't know. I don't think I don't know what their relationship is
Yeah.
to Young Israel.
I don't think they're.
If you want good examples of what renewal Judaism is, go to a service led by Rabbi Daria. Rabbi Daria and Rabbi Josh are on there's a whole spectrum of Reconstructionist synagogues in our movement. And Rabbi Daria and Rabbi Josh, to a lesser degree, are on the renewal end of that spectrum. A lot of discussion of connection, meditation, chanting, earth-centered Judaism. Interestingly enough, they are more halachic than most of us at Oseh Shalom are. But also, interestingly enough, renewal really grew out of a dissatisfaction by some Reconstructionist rabbis with the direction that they felt Reconstructionism was going. So in part, it was a reaction to Reconstructionism, and Reconstructionism has responded to that by its affiliates, a lot of them moving closer to what renewal is saying. So it's been a cross-fertilization between renewal and Reconstructionism, and there are very good relations between the two movements. It's not looked at as you're poaching our rabbis, or there's not a lot of antagonism between the movements as movements, which is really good. They work very closely together.
I actually last week read an article in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, and
Yes.
it's on the renewal movement
Right.
and the history, as well as two academics who are now the thinkers for the movement. One of them is Shalom
Magid. Yeah.
And one of the things he said is that a lot of it was an outgrowth of the counterculturalism in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that it was far more spiritual, environmentally oriented, et cetera. I'd be happy. I don't have everybody's email address, but I'd be happy to forward the article to people.
Sure. No, I was referring to the same article in the beginning.
Okay.
And yes, that it is right. There's much more countercultural stuff, but Reconstructionism has moved closer to that, as you see from from our services and from the generations of rabbis that we've been graduating. So there's been a response both by us to renewal, and also renewal has, like I said, there's been a lot of cross fertilization between the rabbinic, the troops of rabbis, so to speak.
The thing that I did have known, because I've gone to different Tavara services over the years, is that as far as a community,
Mhm.
they're far less structured than any of the other movements. They also have the least financial resources.
That's right.
And they're often
that's right.
struggling, and usually working out of or have their services out of another synagogue or even a community center. The emphasis isn't about building the community. It's centered around the socialism and the religion.
Yes, it's more religion and rabbi centered or guru centered than we would say building community. But they build their own community in their own ways. It's not quite the same as Reconstructionism does it, and they are smaller. And again, their founder only died 10 years ago, so it's a much more much younger and smaller movement. So now, here is everything you always wanted to know about Reconstructionism. These are a lot of the basic practices and principles of Reconstructionism, and I'll let you look at that slide.
Did you send us these, or we're gonna get them later?
I can send you the PowerPoints.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate that.
Sure. I thought if I sent you the PowerPoints, you wouldn't come to the class. So no, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Couple of important things to note on this slide. There's a strong commitment to democratic process and communal decision-making in Reconstructionism, as you all know who have been at innumerable meetings that we have at Oseh Shalom. The community, not the individual, is the building block of Judaism. Now, obviously, communities are made up of individuals, but there's a really strong sense of, and we don't tend to use this term anymore, of communitarianism in Reconstructionist Judaism. That it's the community. We are a community of Jews, and and people who are part of our community, our interfaith couples, for example, make up the community that we are as a Reconstructionist shul, and the community of communities is what makes up the Reconstructionist movement. The movement stresses the sacred covenantal relationship and partnership between clergy and laity. It doesn't look at the rabbi as the CEO. It doesn't look at the rabbi as the king or queen of the synagogue, that they're, my way or the highway. There was, back in the beginning days of the movement, there was a tendency of communities to look at the rabbis to be, I would say, overly democratic, to look at the rabbi as just another member of the community, that they may be a little more educated, but they don't have any more authority than anybody else in the community. That obviously created a lot of problems for the Reconstructionist rabbis. And most of our affiliates have moved away from that strictly democratic focus. And the rabbi does have some, authority by virtue of the position that they hold in the synagogue. But ultimately, what the community says as far as practice goes, and what the community is going to do, is ultimately the deciding factor. That, the rabbi does make decisions, and the rabbi does make calls as the rabbi. But if the community disagrees with what the rabbi says, the community can overrule those decisions. Do you all need to see the slide a little bit more? Let's move on to the next slide. Ethical imperatives, inclusion, communitarianism, there's that word. As Reconstructionist Jews, we act with integrity to Jewish tradition and to our own generation. That's really key. That's what Reconstructionism is. Reconstructionism says that each generation reconstructs Judaism to meet its own generational needs and its own time and place in the chain of Jewish history. That we give huge weight and deference to the tradition, but to quote the oft-quoted phrase, tradition gets a vote, it doesn't get a veto, and it gets a strong vote in how we look at our Judaism. But ultimately, it's as each generation we are required to engage with Judaism, to struggle with it. One of the terms you often hear, I've been to too many Reconstruction services, clearly, I think too much is we are, quote, God wrestlers. That's what many Reconstructionist rabbis say Yisrael means, is one who strives with God. So we're, the Reconstructionist catchphrase for that is we're God wrestlers. We engage with Judaism, we wrestle with it, we deal with it, we grapple with its contradictions, and we figure out for our community and for our generation what works for us as Jews. That's sort of the essence of Reconstructionism.
John, would it be fair to say maybe we've become Judaism wrestlers because we are constantly looking at what we're doing, why we're doing, where it came from, and where we fit in? So, since we have this issue with the God word anyway.
Well, some of you have an issue with the God word, but
defining it.
Now,
that's a thing.
Let me pause here for a second.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That
Sure.
word communitarianism, it came from a book by Amihai Etzioni. Was he an early Reconstructionist?
No. But we borrow liberally from as many places as we can.
Yeah.
But
I like that book very much.
Okay, let's since Val raised the issue of God, I'm going to stop screen share if I can.
Huzzah.
Okay, let's go in our readings to reading number 9.
Judaism.
No, Kaplan believed that the divine works through nature and human beings. He later identified God with things in the world.
Reading 2.
Reading 2.
Actually, let's go to reading. Is reading number 1, nature is infinite chaos?
No.
Oh, actually.
But it's in the bottom there, yeah.
Okay.
6, is it 1?
Okay, so let's read.
Kaplan believe that divine works through nature and human beings. Is that the
No, let's read nature is infinite chaos with all its evils and forever being vanquished by creativity, which is God, not infinite goodness.
Which is God
As
as
the infinite goodness, sorry. And then let's read what you have is reading number 2.
right.
Marcia, you want to?
Kaplan believed that the divine works through nature and human beings. He neither identified God with things in the world, natural, nor did he consider God to be beyond or detached from the world, supernatural. Therefore, Kaplan's theology came to be called transnatural. In this view, there is more to the universe than the sum of its parts. In the organic interrelationship of all of its processes, there are divine powers that truly exist apart from the empirically verifiable phenomena of nature. They are manifest, for example, in human self-consciousness. It takes faith in God to believe that the world is structured in a way that gives significance to the human quest for salvation. A naturalist, however, believes that God works through us rather than upon us. Thus, our sense of responsibility to bring divinity into the world is sustained by the faith that there is a power at the source of human endeavors.
So that's sort of summing up Kaplan's actual beliefs about God is really tricky because they changed and they evolved, and it's really hard to pin them down. But transnaturalism is a classical Reconstructionist phrase that you would hear a lot, especially in the older days of the movement. It's not supernatural, it's not natural, but it's transnatural. That God works through us rather than upon us. Interestingly enough, the way I look at this is that Reconstructionism offers a wonderful alternative to a belief in the divine, a belief in God. That you don't have to believe this, but it offers a beautiful alternative that is very attractive to a lot of that each of us has to struggle with how we view the universe, with how we view the world, and the universe and how it's created, and all those existential questions. Those are for the individual to deal with. But Reconstructionism offers this alternative that you don't have to believe in a, quote, supernatural divine being that is sort of the controlling entity of the universe in order to be authentically Jewish. And for the Jews of his time, that was hugely comforting and helpful to them. It's still so today, but there's a much more diverse population of Jews now than the population Kaplan was speaking to back at that time. Any comments, thoughts?
Well,
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, it's God is neither identified as the world, or it is also God. It was kind of like panentheism. God is the world and more. God is creation and more.
Pantheism talks about many different gods and many different divine beings.
Pantheism, but panentheism.
Panentheism. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Spinoza was a pantheist and was condemned. But the belief that, or the God that Spinoza talked about, has found its way in various strains of Judaism. And I don't know, God is the universe and more, something else also, but God is not wholly other.
Well, again, that's another view of God, and many Reconstructionist rabbis now offer that view as well. But it's not. Again, Kaplan was more tricky about it. He viewed it as more the power that works for salvation in the universe as worked through human beings.
Well, I guess
so. It wasn't as Kabbalistic as as mystical as you're talking about.
Well, what is salvation? I don't know what that is.
I think I may have a reading about salvation.
Fulfillment, it's one of the words.
What?
Fulfillment, human fulfillment. Pardon me.
It's the embodiment of all the best qualities of humanity, I guess we would call it. The fulfilling those qualities of goodness, Kaplan would say, that are in the universe to their greatest potential. That's what salvation would be. Salvation has nothing to do with the soul, nothing to do with, you're going to go to a good place in the afterlife. It has to do with fulfilling the goodness that is an inherent quality of the universe to its maximum potential. That's Kaplan's view.
That's good.
I wonder if if we were to be able to sort of, survey Jews in general or Reconstructionist Jews specifically, and we gave as an option, I wish there were a God, how many people would choose that one? Because I feel like that's sort of how I feel. Like I would like there to be. And so I kind of choose to believe that maybe there is one, but I don't actually believe it. But I wish it were. I feel like that's probably fairly common.
Yeah,
But
but
I have to ask,
that's
Katie,
not helpful as a,
are you
Ah.
talking about the old time God who acts in history and, makes things better? I mean, we get back to the discussion of how we see God, even the one that we think we might want, even though we don't believe it. And I'm just raising the question, because that's the dilemma in part of what Jews today are struggling with.
Yeah, the God of the Torah is mostly unrecognizable to me and
Right.
not somebody I want to hang out with, which is part of what I'm always trying to figure out, is because, Torah is so important to Jews and I have not yet figured out my relationship to Torah.
I think for a lot of us, it's that we've moved from a definition that's dependent on a divine being in God, and that it's more like, this is going to sound weird because it actually comes out of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the God of your choosing, or the God of your understanding. And for us as Reconstructionists, it's very value oriented, and it's very much about the relationship that we have to the world, to other human beings, tikkun olam, and that type of thing.
John,
Mhm.
so I don't have much struggles about this whole issue. I probably stopped believing in God when I was at least in high school.
Mhm.
And interestingly, but if anybody doesn't know, I'm in a retirement community now in Cincinnati, and not a whole lot of Jews here, but we do have two rabbis coming, one on Friday to do a brief service, and the other on Tuesday afternoons to have a discussion. They're both Chabad. And it is so interesting to me what they believe, which I absolutely don't. They are lovely, lovely men. And I and a couple of other people go faithfully because it's so interesting. I ask a lot of questions of them. I don't think I have actually said to the discussion person, I don't believe in God.
Mhm.
But I'm sure he knows what I believe and don't believe by now. But it doesn't matter to me. Why am I a Jew? I was born as a Jew. And I think the Torah, yes, is very important. It's what it holds us together. I think of it, all of those things is our story. And it's my story of who I am. And I don't have to believe in God to think of it as my story, even though
Reconstructionism would support that. Again, what Reconstructionism offers is alternative ways to look at the divine in the universe, and it doesn't require that you quote believe in God at all to be an authentic, Reconstructionist Jew. So,
but I also don't, I think renewal seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, is going back to Hasidism and all the spiritual and mystical and all the stuff that I absolutely don't believe in. So when I ask myself about Reconstructionism, I think, well, it seemed to me that just because of the new rabbis and all that, renewal came out of Reconstructionism. And I thought about Reconstruction as an evolving civilization.
mhm.
I thought to myself, all right, let's stop evolving now. We're okay.
Well,
But what you said, what the one of the things said that talked about generational, and I guess I'm just beyond the generation where I would believe in renewalism. I didn't believe in woo-woo stuff when I was younger, so
Well,
certainly not going to believe it now.
well, yeah, I mean, what at its best, Doris, and what renewal offers is different ways to get in touch with that part of the world and the universe that is greater than ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, some in classical Reconstructionism, it was through Torah study and discussion and engagement. Renewal tends to be through more mystic, quote unquote, mystical, quote unquote, spiritual, quote unquote, practices. For me, and I'm strictly speaking for me, both of them, I think, are really important gateways to tapping into, something that is greater than oneself and connecting with something that to me is ineffable, that you can't describe in words, but you kind of know it when you see it. And a wonderful Torah discussion can do that, but also so can, for me, reciting the prayers or even doing some chanting, because it taps into different centers of one's being, the heart, directly, the head, and tries to connect them together. So I'd say that's what renewal is trying to do at its best.
I think that part of my brain was left out when I was born.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. And there's some Reconstructionists who absolutely agree with you. I think Val is also, not to put words in your mouth, Val, but also is on your end of the Reconstructionist spectrum.
John, to be fair, I find God when I'm hiking in the mountains or staring at the river or whatever. So, it is what we're talking about is having the ability to recognize our spectrum and go with it and appreciate it, however it plays out in other people, I think.
Exactly. And look, there are aspects of the way of what renewal does, and as reflected in part of how we do some services, that I don't personally find meaningful, and I find irritating. But others do not. So I'm trying to moderate my own personal spiritual irritation with recognizing that there's some others that do find that connection through stuff that we do. And that's really what some of my comparative stuff between the movements was trying to show in a very quick way, was, each of the, especially renewal and Reconstructionism, and to some degree reform, is trying to tap into different parts of the human being in different ways. And Reconstructionism has moved closer to renewal, but it still has you still have a wonderful Torah discussion. Renewal tends to be more spiritual and meditation and Kabbalistic and that kind of stuff than a lot of Reconstructionist synagogues. So it's all where you fit on that spectrum, I would say.
I think to a certain extent we drift around depending on what's going on in the world. I have this very strong sense that the last couple decades have just been really rough in terms of, if you're like, I understand it was worse in many ways before. I think part of what's happened more recently is that there's information overload. Everybody knows every horrible thing that's happening at all times.
Yeah.
Between COVID and Trump and climate change, and there's just so much out there that's overwhelming, I think, for younger folks. And when that happens, some of us find ourselves looking more, grasping for something out there that's beautiful and spiritual, as opposed to being rational and talking about things, which can be incredibly frustrating when everything is horrible.
I think it can go either way, because think of it in terms of the growth of evangelicalism. It's that the people who are evangelicals aren't looking for something that's more spiritual and pretty. They're looking for making sense in this world and following a very strict set of rules that make them feel safe.
Yeah, can definitely go either way.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, the description of evangelicals is belied by their political.
The views expressed do not necessarily reflect Oseh Shalom or its staff management.
Exactly. I can't. We don't even want to go there.
Yeah, except for the evangelicals.
But it's I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, that there's something I find comforting going to a Shabbat service like with Ken or Caitlin and Rabbi Daria or Rabbi Josh, and just singing together and being together and engaging in in communal prayer and worship, and not necessarily having to talk about climate change or gun violence or
You don't want them to ignore the
No,
part of the world, though.
That's right. That's right. And I think if you were at services Friday night, you saw how Rabbi Daria and Ken or Caitlin did a really good job of integrating those two things, where she gave a very strong drash on gun violence, but we also had wonderful communal prayer and singing and sharing melodies together. So it's
And she did the same thing for the Teal Shabbat.
right. So where you create it's just where you are on that spectrum of what's comfort for you and what brings you spiritual fulfillment.
Mhm.
So let's it's 10 after 11. We're for sure not going to get through everything. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, is talk a little bit about predicate theology, since we're on a discussion of God, and then maybe set up another Zoom session together for maybe 45 minutes at some point where I can go through some of the nuts and bolts of what the movement is now, what makes up Reconstructionism, what the arms of the movement are, what some of the strengths and weaknesses of the movement are. If that's okay with you, and the reason in part, or a good reason for doing this, is because of all the issues I was having with the TV. So is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
For me?
Yeah.
How about you Zoomers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll try to send out a doodle poll for like in the next couple of weeks when would be a good time for us to meet, not for an hour and a half, but maybe 45 minutes or something like that. Because I know how precious everybody's time is. So let's turn to the reading on predicate theology. My sheet is reading 11. Who the heck knows where it is in your sheet? Theological statements are traditionally expressed in terms of subject-predicate relations. However, God is portrayed, whether as person or being, power or process, one speaks of him as a subject to which there is attached a number of qualities.
We'll see it.
Really?
That's the separate handout from the Reconstructionist.
It was
This one?
a separate,
This one.
it's a separate sheet. It's a separate sheet. It's called predicate theology. I think it's called predicate theology at the top.
From God to Goodliness, proposal for predicate theology
Yes.
by Solai.
Yeah,
Is it just one page?
no.
No, it's 4 pages, 3
Really?
pages.
Is that the original?
Yeah, this is the one.
The perception of predicate.
So we're going to read a few excerpts from this. That's okay, Bill.
I got the 3-page version.
Okay, here's a staple.
I have this,
Oh,
yeah, but where is it on it? I know, yeah.
Okay, this is both together.
It was the first one.
I have them both.
Okay, so anyway,
sorry.
while they're looking
What
for
do you
it,
want? The theological statements are traditionally expressed.
Yes, right.
Okay, so that's the one. It was either part of the whole thing or it's a separate 3 pages.
I sent it out as a separate reading to everybody on Zoom.
Yeah,
It
so
was the
that's.
first
called-
reading.
It's called predicate
Yes.
theology.
It's
From
the
God to-
Reconstructionist February 1975 is what's the title.
Yeah.
Is the first line,
Shoelace.
So in that first paragraph,
right? Theological statements.
what that paragraph is saying is traditionally God is the subject of it's subject predicate. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, to use the traditional formulation. And then the prayer which proclaims God heals the sick entails a number of presumptions. The liturgical language suggests a linear causal relationship between the subject and the patient. God heals the sick person. So move to the next paragraph. How different is it to invert the prayer that God heals the sick, that to reflect the belief that that which heals is divine. The newer formulation directs our attention to the natural realm in which transaction between man and it's using man versus humanity, but man and his environment take place in the process of healing the sick. The vertical relationship between subject and patient is horizontalized.
It's an awful word.
Yeah.
Descriptive though, I get it.
So if you look to the heading where it says predicate prayer, we reverse the subject of predicate and theology is no idle grammatical inversion. It proposes that we reflect upon the predicates of divinity as the proper subject of our theological concern, not the attribute of the divinity, but the divinity of the attribute. Let me repeat it, not the attribute of the divinity, but the divinity of the attribute requires our attention. So again, if you look further down, these divine qualities are not invented, but are discovered in society. They are revealed not by or through some hyperstatized existence above or beneath our, or beyond or beneath the world, which is live, but in and through our transactions with each other. They're disclosed in the values discovered through the relationship between self and other, between self and community, between self and the environment. Unlike subject theology, the unity of the predicates is not maintained by virtue of their belonging to some independent subject like God. The oneness of Elohut, and that's the term he uses for this thing, this predicate theology, is found in the common relationship of all the predicates to goodness, intelligence, compassion, justice, peace, etc., are named divine when they serve ends which the community of faith judges to be good. Terms like godly or divine are emotionally charged. They are used to express the ultimate significance of a community of faith, that a community of faith attaches to certain qualities. The identification of naming such predicates as divine means to raise them out of the ordinary, merely secular, into the realm of the sacred. So that's, and again, I invite you to read the entire article. But let me go back to screen sharing for a second. And so predicate theology, again, that phrase that I repeated, it's not the attribute of the divinity, but the divinity of the attribute. So attributes are justice, compassion, mercy. Those are predicates that Reconstruction says are godly, not their attributes of what we say is God. And that's, you'll hear that a lot from the rabbis, that these are godly attributes, not attributes of God. So I've done a lot of talking. Is that more or less clear what predicate theology is? It's you're talking about the attribute as being a divine quality, because it's really, really important to the community, not that it's the traditional thing of God is mercy, God is justice, God is whatever. Those qualities are godly, but they're not attributes of God.
It's the other way around. Mercy is
Godly.
godly.
Right.
Is it helpful at all to think of this as changing God from a noun to a verb?
Yeah. I think.
That's what keeps coming
Like-
up in my head.
Can you
Like saying that
explain?
God is found in these things, like or divinity, if God is not a word that you're comfortable using, but like divinity is found in community, divinity is found in social justice and tikkun olam and so on.
Love.
Yeah, but also that these are divine quality, that these are divine qualities, as it says in the article, according to Rabbi Schulweis, raises them above just, everything else because we attach such importance to them.
It goes to.
Yes,
It goes
exactly.
to, are we a value-based community? And what are our values? And does claiming that something is a value of the community raise it to that level of a divine quality?
Well, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because a community could say that, vengeance and, destructiveness were important values to itself as a community, and that would make them divine. See, it's sort of a general consensus based, much larger than the individual community, but what we as humans generally consider to be, and all the religions, major religions, talk about things like justice and mercy and compassion as values. It's not just we at Oseh Shalom or we, the Reconstructionists consider these to be values. It's basically kind of a consensus of the major faith traditions.
Now, where does vengeance fit in there?
I'm refuting what you said, that a community could say, vengeance is one of those divine qualities, and I'm saying no, it's
I know what you're saying.
because it's a more general consensus of what are important divine attributes.
I think
We have seen
Things that
religions
create-
justify vengeance as being a divine equality. Look at the Crusades.
Well, and we've done it too. So
Yep. Absolutely. It has been used as a tool in that way. Yeah.
Bill, you had
I'm trying to thinking about vengeance more and trying to. So I think, and this is all maybe sounding a little manichaeistic in terms of poles of good and evil, but I think it's interesting to look at evil, and thinking in terms of predicate theology to basically think about the things that the harms that we experience or the alienation that we may experience, the negatives, vengeance, whatever it may be, all kinds of things. And rather than find and attribute that to a devil or a Satan or something like that, and evil force, it's something that we need to reflect on, is how why do we accrue these negative kinds of things? And then I think that maybe helps to reflect on how we can propel, or we're part of the process of the divine in trying to bring goodness to ourselves and others in a predicate way. And it's putting less emphasis on something external to us that's causing harms or causing us to feel good, or and more that we are both the ones that experience that in that predicative way, but we also have a role in causing the good or evil to occur.
Yeah, I think Kaplan would argue, and I think you can argue that the harms that you're talking about are because we are not bringing to salvation. We're not creating we as humanity have not reached salvation yet, and that is bringing all of these good qualities that we value as divine into their full realization in the universe. And that in time that we talk about, that we dream about, is when that happens through our own actions.
Maslow's self-actualization.
Yeah, well, yeah, although that's the self-actualization, it's not humanity's.
Communal
Well, that's true. It's not communal. You're right.
I think this is mind blowing, and I think that's fun. It's fun to have your mind blown and try to figure it out.
I'm gonna Yeah, these are examples of predicate theology that I took from our prayer book. As you know, and our prayer book doesn't go quite as far as Schulweis does. There was a prayer book draft that came out in the 80s that Val and will recognize that had the fractions, so-called.
Yep.
You had the and Marcia too, the Yah at the top, right?
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Yah, YAH, one of the names for God, and equality at the lower part of the fraction.
Yeah.
It was an interesting concept, but it was pretty much panned, and it didn't make it into the final cut, so to speak, of the prayer book. But what did make it in is all of these attributes. So we say, praised are you, God, the one, abundant one, gentle one, glorious one, great one, hidden one. All these ones that you can read on the screen are all these different attributes.
Actually, I read those as Adonai when we're reading.
Well,
prayer.
yeah, okay.
And what the point was,
And just substitute the ineffable.
right, the idea of assigning an attribute was that it was to be congruent with the particular piece of liturgy, the sense.
Understood.
Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, I think what Joel did in a lot of cases was he basically shook them up in a hat and pulled out the attribute, because some of them don't quite fit.
As I said, I even when I'm reading aloud, I read it as Adonai because it does have a certain arbitrariness to it.
But see, some people object to Adonai because they claim that it means it comes from Lord.
Okay.
So, but anyway, these are examples of how our prayer book and the movement took the notion of predicate theology and converted it into kind of a compromise between what Schulweis was advocating, which goes farther than this, and the more traditional view of looking at God. And I think that's going to change when we produce our next prayer book in the next X number of years, which there's talk about doing. But predicate theology is a really important concept, and I invite you to look at the I invite you to look at the article in a little bit more detail, because it was a really radical and interesting concept when Rabbi Schulweis, who's a Reconstructionist rabbi, proposed it, and the movement really adopted it, and it has taken off, I think, as a central tenet of the movement of these attributes aren't attributes of God, they are godly attributes. And you'll hear Josh talk about that, and Daria too, and when sometimes at services. So it's coming up on 11:30. Any final questions, any final thoughts that you all have?
John, I have a random question for you. Also a thought. I absolutely love where breath divine is used in the Siddur.
Mhm.
I would be very sad to see some of these attributes to go away.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking about renewal, and I seem to recall, I think it was at the last convention, there was a renewal inspired service,
Mhm.
and I attended it, and it was fantastic. I attended it on Zoom,
Mhm.
and I came away with a feeling as if I had been present in person.
Mhm.
And just wanted
That's
to know
great.
if you recall the two rabbis that led that service, because I have not like seen their names, or nothing has kind of like triggered a memory of who they were, but they were two rabbis from the Reconstructionist movement, I think, that led this renewal inspired
I
service.
don't know who's speaking.
Oh, this is Jessica McKinney-Land.
Hey,
How are
Jessica.
you, John?
I'm sorry, Jessica. I don't know who they were, but I can.
Jessica,
But actually,
I've
what?
got the convention booklet, so I can look into it and see if I can
Okay.
do, you think it was an Erev Shabbat or Shabbat morning, or was it a daily?
It was Shabbat morning. You know what? I could probably just ask my mother-in-law, but I figured while
Yeah,
we're here.
that's what I was gonna do, Jessica, is ask Jackie. So
Yeah, she
if
put-
Val can't find it, I was just gonna ask Jackie who did it. So
Okay.
I'm-
Well,
I'm
I
ha-
can always ask her too.
so I'm happy to do it because I think it'd be interesting to know. So
Yeah, yeah. I would just say from the elder millennial perspective, you know, somebody on the in the late 30s into 40s
mhm.
age bracket, what and then maybe I'm speaking just for myself and not, you know, for all of my generation, but I find what I think maybe you had said earlier, John, and somebody else in the discussion, we are inundated with everything that needs to be fixed, everything that's wrong in the world, day in, day out, all throughout the day. And also inundated with rationalism and not being able to rationalize with other people or things that are happening or why, you know, terrible things happen, or motives behind people's actions. Like that's kind of like coming at us all day, every day.
Mhm.
And what I love about the more spiritual kind of heart-centric approach in Judaism is that it is a way to be rid of that and to I guess replenish some of like what's good so that you then can, you know, be recharged and go get back on with the work. So I feel like there's definitely a space for the head centric, but also a space for the heart centric. Like to find a balance of the two is what's really appealing, at least for someone of my age.
That's really good, Jessica. Thank you. I know one thing that I find irritating is to be constantly reminded of how rotten the world is and how traumatized I am. You know, even in services.
Absolutely.
And, you know, again, I think Jessica summed it up well. It's you need a respite, but you also need the head and you need the heart, you know, to kind of, so both pathways I think are important. It's just one can be overemphasized over the other or vice versa.
I really appreciate what Jessica's bringing up. Before I retired, I worked with the Dreamers. So it's a millennial youth immigrant organization. And as immigrants, they were the ones that fought for DACA. So they had a lot of traumatic experiences coming across the border or wherever they came from. And I found it was the first time I was in an organizing environment where they integrated a lot of practices around healing, somatic therapy, and body, heart, you know, mind type of connections, because they felt it had to be integrated into the practice that if you're going to be truly one and be strong and to be able to I guess to achieve what needs to be done against the evils of the world, you have to take care of yourself. You have to heal. There should be a spiritual element to it. It was an important learning for me, because I was in my 60s when I was there. And so it was, they really taught me, I learned a lot.
Well, it goes to show you're never too old to learn, Marie. That's great.
Yeah, I loved them.
Any other final thoughts from anyone? Thank you, Jessica, for bringing a different perspective to the discussion.
I am 44 and I co-sign Jessica's message as a young Gen Xer.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, and the thing is it's not, the world is not worse than it was, but we know everything now. And it's constant. And I mean, even on a personal level, I'm in touch with 1,000 people on Facebook. So I know when everybody has cancer, you know, and like in 10 years ago, I would not have known when 50 different people had cancer. So and my kids, I mean, kids these days, is just an epidemic of anxiety. And so they, you know, but I also find amazing about young people, you know, how they want to fix things that people have been putting up with for a really long time. Not to say that every new generation doesn't want to fix things, but, you know, a lot of the sort of movement, you know, in favor of, you know, fixing our language around trans folks and racism and, you know, all kinds of stuff. I find all of that amazing. But I think it's important, and I think it's important, you know, just like what Jessica said, that there's recognized that we can't just, you know, turn away from these problems, but we need to take breaks from them. So we need to both take care of ourselves and our spiritual, you know, worlds and our own personal families and happiness. But and that also gives us strength to then help people who are, you know, not as privileged as we are, depending on what's going on in our lives or what's going on in their lives.
John, Val, and Doris, this is why I love being around a younger generation of people who are sharp, strategics, thinking about things. One, you know, it's like, I'm tired. I want to be like, I worked professionally in progressive spaces most of my life. I want to give it, I want to hand it over and ask people to just like, tell me what to do. I want to be helpful. I don't want to have to think about it. Just tell me where to go.
Got it.
Okay. Brian, you had a.
I just want to say that what Louise just said, I second and third and fourth. I worked a long time in Tikkun Olam, and I want to hand it off. I'm tired.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop you.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's true.
We still raise our hands.
Yeah, I know.
So don't.
But the older generation has a lot to contribute along with the younger generation. So, you know, I'm not writing this off just yet.
No.
John, just like,
Absolutely.
just a clarification. It's like, I want to give up the power. I'm happy to hold, like, pass on the power.
Understood.
Let the decisions come from newer generations,
Understood.
but I still want to be engaged and helpful.
Understood.
That's so much in part of who I am.
Understood.
So, but I will love Kathy and Jessica, and, you know, just let us know.
What
Thank you.
we retain is not power, but the ability to let you know what we're still thinking. So,
Right. So unless there are any final comments, I'm gonna close this out. Great discussion, everybody.
co-op.
As usual, a Reconstructionist discussion has taken us to places that I didn't know we would go. So, which is great. So
Sounds like Star Trek.
well, it sounds like our Torah discussions every Shabbat that we have on Zoom that you are all invited to participate in.
Thank you so much, John.
Looking forward to the next one, John.
And
Yeah,
I
thank you.
apologize again for all of the mishigas at the beginning of the class. That was not good. So
Not your fault.
It's part of our
It kinda
ongoing
was.
anxiety.
I will between this class and the readings and the slides, I am so proud to be Reconstructionist.
well, that's
No, I
wonderful.
had
Katie.
no idea what I was doing. We are awesome.
Where were you all this time, right?
I will send you.
I knew that I was meant to be here. I just didn't know why.
I will send everybody out the slides, and I'll
Thanks,
also
John.
send out a little poll that maybe we can all get together for a final kind of wrap up session.
Yeah, we've dealt
you,
with
John.
belonging and belief and behavior. Maybe we can go back to that.
Well, we talked about belonging, and we talked about a little bit about believing, and
Talk about.
The behavior part.
We did some behavior.
so we'll talk. We'll talk about it more, Val. Don't worry.
I have no fear.
Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great Sunday, and I'll be in touch soon with
Yeah,
the,
I'll
with the
call you later,
information.
John.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.